I remember the exact moment I should have turned back. I was hiking a narrow, snow-dusted trail deep in the Alaskan wilderness, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your own heartbeat feel deafening. That's when I saw it, an old log cabin half swallowed by moss and shadows as if it had been waiting for me for decades. My curiosity, the same thing that had driven me to document abandoned cabins across the state, wouldn't let me walk away. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and inside was worse than I expected. Personal items, clothes, a child's worn toy, a pair of boots that looked recently worn, were scattered across the room, untouched by time yet out of place in the desolation. On the wall, deep, jagged scratches marked a pattern I couldn't decipher, something almost like a warning carved in panic. Then I saw the journal. Its pages were yellowed and frayed, but the writing was sharp, urgent. Do not linger here. They watch. If you are reading this, it's already too late. My stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but the cold, clear light of the Alaskan afternoon and my fascination with documenting forgotten places held me rooted. If I hadn't peeked inside, I wouldn't be telling you this, and maybe you wouldn't want to hear it. That thought echoed as I realized the peaceful wilderness I had trusted was suddenly alive with secrets, some meant to stay buried. And that cabin, cabin number 1, was only the beginning of a journey I couldn't yet understand. There's a strange comfort in the Alaskan wilderness, the crunch of snow under boots, the smell of pine and frozen earth, the quiet that stretches for miles in every direction. Small rustic cabins are scattered like forgotten markers along trails, each one with its own character, some tidy, others long abandoned, their windows staring blankly like empty eyes. I loved it. Hiking alone, camera in hand, documenting the architecture and the way sunlight danced across icicles, it was peaceful in a way city life could never offer. Occasional locals would wave from a distance or call out greetings, friendly and familiar, reminding me that even in isolation, the human presence was nearby. Nights by the fire were warm, the wood stove crackling, the snowstorm howling outside as I sipped coffee and reviewed photographs. These trips felt like stepping into a timeless world, one where the rhythm of nature dictated the hours. It felt safe. Until the forest started feeling like it was watching. At first it was just a lingering unease, the way shadows clung too long to trees, or the sound of movement too precise to be wind. Cabin number 1 had given me a glimpse that something else lingered in the silence, something patient. The idyllic beauty of snow-draped wilderness masked a quiet, persistent dread, as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting for the next visitor to wander too close. Cabin number 2 sat on the edge of a frozen clearing, half hidden by a stand of spruce trees. From the outside it looked abandoned, weathered logs darkened by years of snow and rain. But there was something in the air that made my stomach tighten. The trail leading up to it was scuffed, as if someone or something had passed through recently. I hesitated, camera ready, heart hammering. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't alone. And I wasn't supposed to be here. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though the hearth was cold. Strange markings lined the walls, etched into the wood in patterns that seemed to pulse in the flickering light. Burned-out candles, half melted in their holders, lay scattered across a dusty table. On the floor, remnants of what looked like small ritualistic offerings. A broken doll, stones arranged in circles, feathers carefully placed, made me step back instinctively. A journal rested on a shelf, its pages yellowed but ink still legible. The entries spoke of fear, of whispers at night, and of people vanishing from the forest without a trace. I snapped photos, the lens trembling slightly, and in the silence I thought I heard movement from just beyond the doorway. Later, when I asked a local about the cabin, his expression went pale. "You shouldn't be poking around there," he muttered. "People go missing near those woods. Some never come back." The casual warning sank deep, mingling with the sense of unease that had already begun to coil around me. I couldn't ignore it. Now I needed to know the stories these cabins held. Back in town, I started piecing together what I had seen. I pored over old maps, scanned online forums, and dug through newspaper archives, searching for any mention of the cabins I'd stumbled across. Slowly, a disturbing pattern emerged. Each cabin, though scattered across remote parts of the forest, had a history of disappearances. Hikers, hunters, even locals who had ventured too close, all gone. leaving only whispered rumors and sparse records. Some journals I found left by previous explorers were chilling. One entry read, "They know you're watching. Don't stay too long or they'll remember your face." Another recounted faint scratching on walls, objects moving on their own, and shadowy figures glimpsed through frosted windows. Each time, the descriptions overlapped eerily with my own experiences: scratches, untraceable sounds, and the sense of being observed. The more I read, the more I realized the cabins weren't just abandoned structures. They were linked by something unseen, something that seemed to track anyone who dared approach. I traced the locations on a map and noticed an unsettling symmetry, as if someone or something had intentionally placed them along specific points in the forest. One journal entry warned, "The cabins remember those who linger." I felt a chill run down my spine. These weren't mere coincidences. They were warnings. And now, after my own encounters, I understood. The forest, the cabins, the journals, they weren't just history. They were alive in a way that watched me, remembered me, and perhaps would not let me leave untouched. By the time I reached the third cabin, the forest had already begun to feel wrong. The snow under my boots seemed softer, muffling every step as if the woods themselves were trying to silence me. The cabin stood crooked at the edge of a frozen creek, its windows shattered but draped with torn curtains that swayed though there was no wind. Inside I found children's toys, rusted tin cars, a porcelain doll missing its eyes, all lined up facing the door as if they'd been waiting for someone to return. When I turned away for a second, one of the toys had moved, just a few inches, but I hadn't touched it. The fourth cabin sat deeper in the woods where even the birds wouldn't sing. A faded symbol, something like an eye inside a spiral, was carved into every beam of its frame. Inside, the air was thick with an acrid, coppery smell. My flashlight beam flickered against walls covered with strange writing and overlapping languages I couldn't read. In the corner stood a chair facing the window, and on it a melted candle burned, though I'd seen no sign of recent human life. As I backed away, the chair creaked, turning ever so slightly toward me. Cabin 5 broke me. By then I was moving automatically, half expecting each new place to be worse than the last. This one had no door, just a gaping frame leading into darkness. Animals avoided the clearing, tracks circling far around it. I stepped inside and whispers rose up from beneath the warped floorboards, too low to understand but unmistakably human. When I shone my light, a shadow darted across the far wall, but there was no one there. By the fifth cabin, I realized the stories were all true, and I was part of the story now. My breath came faster, fogging in the freezing air as the realization hit me. These weren't random horrors. They were pieces of a pattern tightening around me, and soon there might be no way out. When I got back to my motel room that night, my fingers were shaking so badly I could barely type. I needed answers, anything to explain what I'd seen. I dove into the depths of the internet. Survival blogs, obscure forums, half-forgotten Reddit threads buried under years of inactivity. At first, it was just whispers, people mentioning weird cabins in Alaska, eerie symbols, or unexplained whispers. Then I began finding posts that mirrored my own experiences almost word for word. One hiker described the same spiral eye markings I'd seen carved into the beams. Another posted a blurry photo of a doll without eyes perched on a windowsill. Both accounts stopped abruptly a few days later. No updates. No replies. On an abandoned forum called Cabin Watchers, someone had uploaded grainy night vision footage of a shack identical to the third cabin I'd found. In the clip, you could see faint movements inside like silhouettes pacing. The final post in that thread was only 5 words, "If they see you noticing," followed by a blank comment with nothing but a timestamp. I sat staring at the screen, my heart pounding. I had thought I was looking for a community of survivors, but what I found instead was a graveyard of warnings, disconnected voices reaching out before vanishing into the same silence that had crept into those cabins. The more I read, the clearer it became. These weren't isolated incidents. The cabins weren't random, and by looking for them, by connecting the dots, I wasn't an observer anymore. I was already on their radar. Even after I left the forest, the cabins came with me. It started small, my keys vanishing from the nightstand and reappearing neatly on the windowsill, my boots set at the door pointing outward like someone had arranged them for me to leave. Then the knocks began. 3 sharp raps at my motel window at 3:13 a.m. every night. No footprints in the snow below. When I'd bolt upright and pull the curtain back, There'd be nothing but empty darkness, the kind that feels like it's staring back. Shadows flickered in the corners of my eyes just at the edge of my vision, always gone when I turned my head. Local wildlife reacted too. The ravens that had circled lazily above the trees now perched silently on rooftops staring. Once a fox slunk across the parking lot, its fur patchy and eyes reflecting like metal. It stopped at my car and sniffed the handle, like it knew where I'd been. The strangest part wasn't what I saw, but what I felt. A constant awareness pressing against me, as if the forest itself had reached out and wrapped invisible roots around my mind. The cabins weren't just places. They were something else, something alive, following me, learning me. And no matter how far I drove, no matter how many locks I slid shut at night, I knew it wasn't over. This wasn't exploration anymore. This was a hunt, and I wasn't the hunter. By the time I reached cabin there was 10, night had swallowed the forest whole. The path was barely visible under a thin layer of snow. Every crunch of my boots amplified in the oppressive silence. I had read the warnings. Some said this cabin was cursed beyond all others, that the air around it pulsed with something older, something hungry, but curiosity had a stronger pull than caution. The cabin itself loomed like a dark sentinel, its wood warped and blackened, windows staring like empty eyes. I hesitated at the threshold, feeling the icy brush of wind whispering unintelligible words through the cracks in the boards. Inside, the air was thick, metallic, and alive. Shadows clung to corners, shifting unnaturally as I moved. On the floor, remnants of old rituals, circles scratched into the wood, candles long burnt down to stubs, and strange symbols scorched into the walls, made me stagger back. Then came the sound. Movement from inside the walls, the faint shuffle of feet pacing above me, and the whispers of countless voices, overlapping in a chorus of despair. Names I didn't recognize, and then one I did, mine. My own voice, repeating words I had never spoken aloud, calling me deeper. I turned a corner and froze. Figures, tall, faceless shadows, stood between me and the exit. Or perhaps they weren't between me and the exit. Perhaps I was inside their gaze, the line between observer and observed collapsing. The floor groaned beneath me, walls closing in, and a cold, wet sensation brushed my neck. Everything went black. I woke hours later, disoriented, lying on the snow-covered ground outside cabin.